Welcome, GrayMatter leaders, to our unpublished podcast for GrayMatter Leadership Coaching. I'm so delighted that you've chosen to tune in once again and invest some of your time today to engage with us in a conversation that's intended to move you into the leading edge of your life and business as a leader. At GrayMatter, we believe you have the power to activate the part of your brain scientifically known as gray matter. And in so doing, you can take yourself out of autopilot thinking and behavior. Now, in case you're wondering, my name is Jeanette, and I'm the head of sales and communication here at GMC. I'm also your host for today's leadership conversation, and I'm joined by my co-host and founder of GMC, BJ Gray herself. Today, we are going to be talking about trust. And I feel it's like so opportune and perfectly timed for us to be bringing this up just because of the nature of where we are in terms of as a nation, as a global community, as parents and coworkers entering the digital space. Like everything is changing so much. And we get to focus today on how we can build upon, improve, maybe establish, or even heal trust in the workplace. So let me bring on BJ without further ado, and we can jump into this. BJ, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Jeanette. Thanks.
Welcome. I'm so glad we get to do this again. Honestly, I keep looking forward to these things so much. So I'm so glad you're here and that you could make some time for us. And of course, as I said in the intro, trust in the workplace. That's what we're focusing on today. As always, I'm going to let you take over so we can just jump right into it. So talk about trust. What is trust and why is it so important for us as teams working together?
Okay, thanks. Well, obviously trust is what holds everybody together. I think trust is the glue that holds teams together. So we really need to start developing not only relationships in the workplace and have a more human workplace, but also we need to make sure we're building the trust in those relationships. And think about it, even in your own relationship, whether it be with your husband or your significant other or your family, trust is what holds the relationships together, right? So
Yeah.
when there is trust in the workplace and these relationships are built on trust, then people come to work and they perform better and they enjoy coming to work better. And for the most part, when there's trust between leaders and employees, the leaders enjoy their job better. And so right now in this era of leadership in the workplace, human dynamics to me is becoming more important than even the tasks and the performance of the teams. And I want to lay the groundwork why I think that's so true. I think we're here because our society has evolved so much in the past 20, 30 years, and so has our brains. Our brains have evolved. And so we have this capacity to continually analyze things on a deeper level. Our brain just keeps thinking. And I want to say we're like overthinking so much. And when we overthink our situations, whether they're work or in our life, we tend to start thinking about, am I included? Is life fair? Am I being valued in the workplace? Like these things never came up before in employees' minds as much as they do now. So I think our society has evolved to this much higher place, and our brains are evolving to be able to like analyze things more deeply. And so now that we're in this very evolved era, everything's at our fingertips, we need to evolve our relationships and how we deal with each other at work. And that's why building relationships, having a more human approach to work is what leaders need to do. And I believe that or I want to say, like when I left corporate America, I took a deep dive into the study of human behavior relationships. And it became clear to me that the way you're going to be able to do that, to build these relationships with trust, is for you to develop the mental fitness, which I talk about a lot on this podcast, and the emotional intelligence, which will give you the tools to deal with people. And that will lead to trust, not only in yourself, but in others. And without this trust, you're bound to fail as a leader nowadays. So,
Especially like you just said, because of how dynamic we've all become. Things have just evolved so much, right?
Right. We're so
Wonderful.
dynamic. And so if you don't have these qualities as a leader to be able to build relationships and trust, then you will
Mm.
probably fail. If you continue to stay in that traditional mindset of leadership, you will struggle as a leader. And
But so why is trust right up there for you? Like, why is it so important?
because I think it's this need of humans nowadays to feel more valued, to feel included, to feel like they're on a journey and they're not just going to work and performing a task. They want to be part of something bigger. They're analyzing their life more and it needs to have more purpose and meaning. And they want to
Hmm.
be included more into what's really going on in the company and why decisions are being made. And so if we don't start connecting to them and listening to them and listening to their stories and their value, and instead of just asking them to come in and perform a task, instead of just, having them come in and do their responsibility and then go home for the day, they're not going to be happy. They're not going to be satisfied, and you're not going to get what you want out of these employees. So the leadership style has to change to be more um, on a more human approach, more connected on these
Yeah.
relationships and trust. And
Yeah.
that is what's going to make the workplace more satisfying, more productive. The bottom line, is going to grow if you're having a more efficient and productive workforce. But the only way we're going to get there is with these human relationships at work that are built on trust and empathy. And I think, if you just peel back and take a look at one of the greatest, strongest teams in the world, which is the Navy SEALs, right? Simon Sinek, who
Hmm.
studied the Navy SEALs, he made this case. He made this case that even the Navy SEALs aren't made up of the strongest, toughest, smartest, task-oriented candidates. They all possess something much deeper. And that the ability is to reach deep inside themselves when they're mentally and physically tired and find the energy to help someone else. So if you just if you just describe that in parallel to the workplace, it's trust is what makes the Navy SEALs the Navy SEALs. Not the smartest, not the toughest, not the strongest. That's what makes the teams thrive. And so that is why it is so important that we start evolving leadership styles to know how to do this, how to build the relationships.
In your opinion, what do you think motivates people today?
So this is going to tie beautifully right into why relationships and trust are so important. It's because people operate from a place of, am I loved? Do I belong? And do I feel safe? And they need these three things to avoid operating from a place of fear. So let's face it, we don't always feel like we have these three things in our life. And love, safety, and belonging, or being accepted. If we don't have those three things, our brains automatically tend to react, and they'll react if we're operating from fear. They'll get defensive. They'll start judging or feel like they're being judged, and they'll start shaming themselves and they'll start putting themselves down. So what motivates people to come out authentically and feel safe and feel like they can trust is love, belonging, and safety. And so we need to create that in the workplace so that they show up and do the work and are satisfied with doing their work. And think about this from what you've learned or experienced in your families growing up or the community you grew up in. If you didn't have these three things, love, safety, and belonging, then those behaviors that you learned at a young age will carry out throughout your life and even in the workplace. So for instance, if you grew up poor without a lot of money, then you're probably going to have issues feeling safe when it comes to money. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
at your workplace, you're making a salary, you go to work and your boss gives you some feedback and you take that feedback and it's not done in a way that is in a trusting relationship, you're going to take
Mm-hmm.
that feedback as a threat that you don't have safety around this job, that you're not doing a good enough job, and you're probably going to feel insecure that you might be getting laid off and you won't show up and do the best work because you're operating from this place of fear. So
Mm-hmm.
So that whole dynamic from where you grew up, what community you grew up in, what ecosystem you grew up in, will play out in the workplace. So love, safety, and belonging is why we are who we are and how we behave. And so that has to be part of the workplace to motivate these employees to feel trust and do the best work they can.
So behavior, whether we like it or not, really plays a major role in how we perform and the results that we produce. And it's not something that you can just ignore as a leader, right?
Oh, totally right. It's human behaviors is where the trust is going to be built, for sure.
Right. So if I'm a leader and I'm listening to this right now and I'm loving this conversation, I'm like, okay, fine, I definitely get it. So what would be some of the qualities that I can start um, developing in myself in order for me to start establishing trust within my employees or my team?
Okay, great question. Thanks for asking this. So I think leaders, to really establish trust, they need to demonstrate, one, reliability. And by this, I mean, take responsibility for the work, as you know, with your team, not just your team. Don't throw them under the bus if there's something's going wrong. Like, you need to be a part of that responsibility. So reliability is a behavior that leaders need to demonstrate. Accountability. Leaders need to show up in a vulnerable state as well. They need to share their weaknesses as well as their strengths. They need to be able to say sorry if they mess up. And we're human. We're going to mess up as leaders, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
also need to demonstrate integrity. And by this, I mean, they need to be honest with their teams. They need to give them the lay of the land and make sure that they're not leaving things out, because people don't trust when they feel like something's being left out of the story about what's going on with the project or the business or where they're coming from, right? They need to be really honest with their employees, even in those moments of feedback. And they need to be non-judging. Leaders need to make sure they don't come to the table with a bias, that they don't come to the table with an agenda. They just need to come sort of more open to the situation and be non-judging in that situation. They also need to be generous. They need to truly let the employees know that they see them and that they have their back. So these aren't hard skills. These are emotional intelligence skills that need to be developed in leaders today.
How does one go about doing that, like say in a company?
Well, it takes time, and it's these gestures that start to build. It's an iterative process between two people, right? So it's not like you're just going to show up one day and start saying, I have these 5 behaviors and now you should trust me. Trust is built over time, and you actually may not be perfect at it at first either. So, go easy on yourself, because as you practice these behaviors, you will make mistakes. And so the first thing to do is to try to make a situation between you and that employee feel safe and not uncomfortable. And the leader, to me, the easiest way to do that is for the leader to know how to hold another person's perspective without reacting. So the first way you can start to demonstrate or practice this psychological safety for the other person to start building trust is to be able to just hold their perspective, listen to where they're coming from, and not react. As leaders, we tend to want to react, fix, direct, and move them on, right? Just,
Yeah.
I hear you, now go do this. But no,
Yes.
the first way to build trust is to really just hold their perspective, don't judge them, and don't react.
And sometimes that's super uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it really is. But when you can start to demonstrate that and practice that, then the person starts to come to you and be vulnerable and not be so dismissive themselves. And think about it when you were a kid, and why a kid never tells his parents the truth, right? They don't feel safe because their parents always go off the handle and react to
Yes.
the situation
Yes.
that the kid is telling them, right? They don't feel
Yes.
safe to come tell the truth. So they hide, they
Yes.
lie. Well, it's the same
Yes.
thing that goes on between a leader and an employee. It's like a parent and a kid. The more you
Yeah.
make them feel like it's okay to tell the truth and you can hold them without
That
judging, without
space.
reacting, they're going to
Yeah.
start to share with you where they're not good at something, where they see a problem, where they made a mistake. And that's what you want. You want to be able to respond with curiosity before reacting. And I think every parent needs to do that too with their child.
Every parent needs to learn this. But as you're saying this, I'm actually thinking about one of the reasons why I love Oprah so much is because watching her all these years, and I would see her, she has interviewed literally anyone and everyone I could think of in the States who's like super successful and has a great story, and even those who are not successful, in the sense that, famous celebrity status. Everyday people who have maybe very difficult stories, very troubling stories, very traumatic stories. And I would always watch her to understand how is she able to get people who don't like communicating with the public to people who have super traumatic experiences that they probably wouldn't want to share in public, but she can create this space where anyone, regardless of status, can share, very vulnerably their truth.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just holding someone's story and perspective without reacting, without trying to fix it, without judging them, just being really neutral and being really curious to why they are saying what they're saying.
And you're saying that's something we can all learn. It's
We can
just
all
practice.
practice. Yeah, all of us
Yes.
should practice, even in our daily day-to-day lives with even your family or your friends or your
Yes.
relationships. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So something else you're always mentioning to me is the importance of feedback when it comes to trust. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? How does that tie into everything we've just talked about?
Yeah, well, okay, so relationships are about communicating. So we're always communicating and giving advice or feedback. And I actually like to frame feedback nowadays as as using the word advice. I feel like feedback has become this dirty word in corporate America. It means that something's wrong, right? Feedback sounds like I did
Yes.
something bad. So maybe if we framed
Yes.
it as advice, it would start to build more trust. That's number one. But
Okay.
all relationships are built on communication. And one of the key things we do in companies is we give feedback, which is part of the communication chain. So I like to understand how my employees want to receive this feedback or advice. So the one way to build trust is start to have that conversation about just the ugly aspect of relationships in the workplace, which is feedback. How do you want to receive it? What is the good way that you like to learn and grow? And really ensure that you have their back. So every time you're going to give them a piece of advice, make it in a way that they know this is coming from a place of you have their back, but you need to engage in these conversations so that they get better at what they're doing, so that they can improve and grow themselves. And
I love it. Wait, so I'm gonna
yeah,
put you on the spot here. Give me like a practical example. Are you saying like for example, you would ask me, okay, Jeanette, how do you like to receive feedback? And then I tell you, like, is that what you mean?
yes, yeah, totally. hmm and
And then based on, go ahead.
a lot of employees will tell me, just give it to me honestly. I have thick
Yes,
skin. I can take
yes.
it. And just asking that word makes
Just
them feel like,
asking.
yeah, makes them feel like, oh, so this is going to be part of our routine. And you're telling me that it's not going to mean that I'm always, getting punished with this feedback. Like just asking that turns it from being a punishment to this is just going to be part of our working relationship.
Ah, love it. Okay.
I had
It's
an
that
employee.
simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. I had an employee about 5, 6 years ago who,
Mhm,
when I took over this department, she wasn't at the top of her game, and
mhm,
she needed a lot of work. And the
mhm.
management team, my boss was telling me, you've got to get her in shape. You've got to get her to be better than what she's doing. So or else she's going to go. It was like, do or die, right?
Yeah.
And I had never, she didn't know me from Adam. I was a brand new boss, and I didn't really understand her world that well yet. I hadn't learned her department's responsibilities. And so I had to come in and quickly build trust, because I knew it was on me if she was going to get fired or not. And so immediately I said to her, we're going to have to work closely together. How do you want to start receiving feedback from me? How do you want to start learning from me? And I have your back. And if you're open to me continually giving you advice and tips and observing you, I promise you, you will succeed. But we have to have this trust. And
Yeah.
she said, oh, and she was so afraid, me, the new boss, she thought for sure
Yes.
she was out the door. And
Yes.
sure enough, we did this. We had this relationship that was brutally honest for a year. And the business never made me exit her. They gave me the time to work with her. And she was eventually promoted. So she went from out the door to being promoted. But it's because we had this relationship that was safe for her. It felt very safe when I gave her advice.
Yes, I see it. I see it. It's beautiful. It's exactly the same thing, like even with parents and like older children, it's kind of the same experience, right? Where
Yeah.
it's about establishing the trust and also just asking.
Yeah. Trust is
Very, very.
built in the middle of very tough conversations. If you're
Yes.
going to get trust with somebody, or else if you don't gain that trust in the middle of a very tough conversation, it's going to go sideways. And I think this is why so many leaders actually avoid giving advice or giving real honest feedback. And this is why some employees don't ever improve, is because their bosses are shortchanging them because the boss is afraid to give the feedback. But that is where you have to establish this trust, because that is where they're going to get better. You're going to give honest feedback or honest advice. Yeah, it's amazing. If you skip it, then this person is not going to survive. Or maybe you're not, because your teams aren't doing well, so you don't survive as the leader. They let you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Really good stuff. And we could go on forever, but as always, we want to keep this short. And I know you have a hectic day ahead of you. So I have one more thing to ask. Any final notes you want to add to this? Any last piece of advice you could give our leaders?
No, just go practice and be compassionate with yourself in those moments. Like I said, you're human, you're going to make mistakes, and just do your best listening more than speaking. And that will start to evolve how you hold perspective and be able to build this trust. So
listening more than speaking. Wonderful. This has been awesome, BJ, as always. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me. We're doing this again, right?
Yes, we'll do this again for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Well, then, until our next conversation, I definitely look forward to what you're going to bring to the table next time for sure. But for now, I wish everyone an amazing day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.